Greetings, BlazeLeeDragon here, and today I'm going to teach you how to put a custom weapon into Skyrim. Now, the interesting thing about this method that's a little different than the other ones is so far I've not seen any tutorials that cover how to do it using Blender and using basically the current version of Blender, or at least current at the time of this video. So basically all you're going to need in order to do this is you are going to need Blender. I'm currently using Blender version 2.71, and you're going to need a Fallout 3 archive utility. Now basically, just to give you a basic rundown to see if this will help guide you through it, and then I'll walk you through step by step what I did in order to upload my own custom weapon mesh into Skyrim. Now, once you take the Fallout 3 archive utility, you're essentially going to open up the mesh archive that exists in the Skyrim folder. You're then, so right here I'm going to basically click this Skyrim meshes, and then I'm going to click open. This is going to extract all the meshes, and then you can pick the one that you want to work with that's closest to your weapon. You of course have to model your own weapon within Blender, and then you're going to have to do what's called UV unwrapping. You're then going to have to work on your own textures. You're going to have to build your DDS maps for your UV unwrapping, and then once you have all of that completed, you would then begin with this method, which is essentially taking a working Skyrim NIF. Then you're going to use nifskope and export the OBJ that is dealing with each piece of the sword or weapon or axe or sheath or scabbard or whatever you're going to work with, and you're going to export each piece, and you're going to use that to line up and size your mesh that you created custom within Blender. Then the next step that you're going to do after that is you're actually going to take your Blender mesh and you're going to export it as a 3ds file. You're then going to use this 3ds file and import it into your NIF file. So let me give you, like I said, a step-by-step of how you do this. So here in the Fallout 3 archive utility, I've got the meshes open. I'm going to go under weapons, and then I'm going to pick any weapon that's close to what I'm looking for. I'm going to be working with the Ebony Sword, so if you go under the Ebony folder, you can take your Ebony Sword NIF. I believe there's a two-handed version of this, like an Ebony Greatsword, which is, you know, two-handed sword, or you can do the battle axe, dagger. It all depends on the type of item you're going to work with. I'm actually going to be modding into Skyrim what is known as a Yanma. It's a Chinese blade single-edged sword, and I'm going to be adding it to my Chinese blade mod that I have out there that has a Jin and a Miao Dao. So after you've done this, you're pretty much just going to hit action and extract selected files for the ones that you're working with. Unless you want to do them all, it's up to you. So that's pretty much all you need the Fallout 3 archive utility for. As I mentioned, you're also going to want to download Blender 2.71, and you're going to of course need nifskope, which I forgot to mention, in order to work with the NIFs. So here we have the Ebony Sword NIF. So if I double click this, it opens up in nifskope, and you can see here that we have the sword itself, we have the scabbard, and then we have the two blood effects. So that's the four objects that we need to model within Blender. I've already modeled them. If you guys want a tutorial on how I model stuff, that's fine. I'm not an expert on Blender. I just do what works for me. So these four items is essentially what we need to replace. So you're going to want to take, and I'll click on each one of these. You'll notice that they highlight over here. It's not showing the textures on mine, which is not really an issue for the game. It still shows up in the game, and I'll show you that. But if you click down and open these, you have data that's associated with each one of the items that's being highlighted when you click it. So this tri shape data, this basically is all the wire mesh, the thing that you're building in Blender. So this is what we're replacing. So in order to do that, we need to take this and we need to hit File, Export, and export it as an OBJ file. So when I export it as an OBJ, it's gonna say, hey, you know, let's see, select the entire scene, that's fine, we're gonna export it, and then we're gonna choose where we want to put it so that we can start working with it. So I'm going to go to the new folder that I'm working with now. You can call it whatever you want. I was just testing and working with my Yanmadao. I'm going to go ahead and take this out. Doesn't matter what you call it. I'll just call it EB for Ebony for right now, and then just go ahead and hit save. So now I've got the OBJ and the MTL file, so go ahead and leave those there. Then after that, you're going to go into your Blender, and like I said, I'm working with 2.71, and then inside of Blender, you're going to open up the mesh that you built. So here are the 3 meshes that I made. I'm using the blood one, which is essentially the effects for the blood on the blade. I'm using the same file because it's the same size. So you're making 3 blend files, but you're using one twice. So all you really need to do is pretty much blend the weapon and the scabbard if it has one. Like a lot of the two-handed weapons do not have scabbards, which is fine. But in my case, I do have a scabbard, so I'm going to be working with that as well. And I'm going to point out some stuff to make sure that your scabbard's not leaving and moving with your sword. So here is the Yanmadao. I'm going to double click it. Here is the sword that I blended in Blender. And I kind of, try to give it some blood grooves, and I try to give it, a curve for the blade, nice and subtle. And this is a Yanmadao. This is a Chinese sword, single-handed. So that's why I'm using the Ebony Sword, because it's single-handed as well. So yeah, let's go ahead and briefly just discuss, like I said, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to take the mesh and get this into nifskope so that we can create a nif and upport that in the Skyrim. And we want to keep all of its UV unmapping. And I've noticed that if I use the export option and I select OBJ, it's losing all of my UV unmapping, and that's why I'm using this method for the .3ds, and it's worked for me, and it's able to keep everything intact, so hopefully it'll work for you too. If for some reason you do not have these appearing here where it says under File, Export, 3ds, and then Wave, Front, OBJ, I did install an older version of Blender, which was the old method, the 2.49b, with all 4 of the files, the Python, the nifskope tools, or the Blender nif tools, and things like that. So I don't know if that affected my 2.7.1. I don't think it did, but just in case you don't see this, that's might have had an effect on it. But as far as I know, this stuff is actually supposed to come standard with it now. So the next thing that we do is after we open up our mesh that we created, and like I said, this is something you're going to have to model yourself. Once you've modeled it, make sure you UV unwrap it. Make sure you have, and just to basically give you an idea of what UV unwrapping is, it is essentially the mesh laid out flat, and that's where you're going to create your textures off of. So when you have this unwrapped, and I don't want to waste time doing that, so I'm just going to go ahead and continue. Haha. But yeah, you want to make sure that you unwrap it, and it basically makes a laid out mat that you can then texture and color and whatever you need to do. You're going to have to hit File and Import, and you're going to import the OBJ file. This OBJ file is the one that we just exported. So here's my EB OBJ, the one that I exported from the working nif. When I import this, you'll notice that it's sitting over itself. So here's the whole thing, and you can see them over here on the side. You can see the Ebony Sword, the blood effect, the scabbard, and the blood lighting. So you have all 4 of the objects that we need to create. The purpose of this is to resize. Now, as you'll notice, mine's already sized. So all you need to do is select your object and then press S and go in. Oh, I want to just select my object. There we go. And with S, you can kind of size it how you want. You can use rotations. I recommend hitting the 1, 3, or 7 to rotate in the proper direction. However you want to do it is fine. The object that you want to do here is to try to line up the handle with where the handle is of the other weapon. So as you can see, they're on top of each other, so you want to line it up as best you can. This will also show you the size that you need. And if I want here to work with a cleaner workspace, you can go ahead and delete the blood effects and the scabbard, and then this will give you just the sword to work with, or not, since looks like I'm still seeing the scabbard there. Oh no, maybe that is the sword. Okay, yeah, that is. Okay, so the scabbard's gone, and you can see the blade is slightly shorter, but this at least gives you an idea of the size and shape of everything. Always work with your OBJ file as far as sizing goes, and the basic direction, like where the curve of the blade is, otherwise it'll appear backwards in your character's hand. When you are done with sizing it and everything looks good, you then want to take away everything, and then you are good to save this. Now, once you're done saving that, you're going to go back into your NIF, and now you're going to re-export. Oh, it looks like I have two of them open. You're going to re-export your data again, but this time you're going to export it using the DAE file, the .dae. Now, the reason for this is I've come to find out that if you just save and export your sword, and I'll go ahead and show you just so you can see it. If you go ahead and hit export and you export the 3DS like I suggested, let's see, new folder, there we go, and I export that. If I take these and I put them straight into my NIF, so I'm going to highlight where it says Ebony Sword here, and I'm going to hit File, and I'm going to hit Import my 3DS, and I'm going to say OK. I'm going to go ahead and double click it. You're going to notice here at the bottom it appears sideways and in the wrong direction. The reason for this is beyond me. I have no idea. But I know how to fix it and work with it. What we need to do is we need to rotate it, and I noticed that the DAE file has the orientation that we need for the sword. So let me go ahead and delete that, since like I said that's a bad 3DS. We don't want to use that. I'm going to go ahead and go back in the Blender. And this time I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to import that DAE file, which is this top option up here. When I do import that, it's going to be itty bitty teeny tiny, like really teeny tiny. Let me actually zoom in here. This little object right here, let me grab it off to the side. Yeah, that's the sword. You don't want to resize it, but what you do want to do is use this as a guide. You'll notice here that it's laying along, I believe this is the y-axis, the green line. So that means I want to reposition my entire sword along that line. So what I do is once I have that all taken care of, and I'll go ahead and just take it out all together. I'm going to just reopen this. Give myself a clean thing to work with. Anyway, so we want to bend it along the Y. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the 3 to bend it along the Y. I'm going to go down here to the bottom, and I have this little pivot center option next to the object mode, wire mode, and I'm sorry, I want to make sure I right click this to make sure I have it selected, and I'm going to change the pivot point to my cursor, which is in the center, because everything else is lined up. I just want to make sure this is in the center. So then I'm going to hit R, and I'm going to rotate, and I'm going to lay this flat, or as flat as I can get it. Sometimes working with the tip here can help just to get that as centered as much as you can. So once you have it centered to where you want it, it's now pretty much ready for upload. So you took your OBJ file, you sized it appropriately, rotated it how you wanted to, then you took your DAE to help with the last part of the orientation. So then I'm going to hit File again, and I'm going to hit Export, and I'm going to export as a 3DS file. I'm going to go ahead and just call that the Unwrapped, because that's what I'm working with. And then I'm pretty much done with Blender for that piece for right now. So now, when I open up my working NIF, and I want to replace this. Now, as you notice, I didn't save, so it's going to come back to its Ebony Sword until I save it. I'm going to go ahead and delete the blood effect for right now and the scabbard, just so I can show you what I'm working with. Alright, so this is the sword, and this is what we're going to replace. So as soon as I import this 3DS, it's going to replace it, and it's going to replace it with the textures. So I'm going to highlight my Ebony Sword, and I'm going to hit File, Import 3DS. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and select my Yamada 3DS, and I'm going to hit Open. And now the orientation's correct. There is one more problem, though. You'll notice here it's not really centered off. This little X was over the hand grip, and right now your character is going to grip this pretty high. So I found a fix for this as well. So we're going to come down here to the Yamada, and you'll notice this is automatically going to replace the name and create a new thing, which I thought was kind of cool. And I'm going to go into the I'm going to stay up here on the top, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go hit Transform, and I'm going to hit Edit. Now I notice with this particular mesh, and you might have to mess with this by changing these or altering these, But this one, if I zero everything out, it'll actually jump to the center where I want it to be. So I hit 0, 0, 0. Now that I have it zeroed out, this is actually center and perfect, and this is how I'm using it in the game currently. And then I can go ahead and accept my changes. And then that's pretty much done for the sword. Now I can come in here into my BS shader properties, BS shader textures, go down to textures, and then this is the path of where I have my textures at. For my particular mod, I've got folders. I've got one that says Chinese for the download mod that I'm uploading to the Nexus, and I'm going to hit slash here, and then I'm going to say yanmadao.dds, and then your normal map goes here, and I forget what the M is for, but I actually am not using it currently on my sword because it seemed to make things a little too bright. So I just worked with these two, but you can play around with the textures as needed or look at other tutorials that cover that. So that's essentially how you're getting the sword in there. So let me go ahead and work with the blood. The blood is going to work the same way, so let me go ahead and pull back my let's see, the nif, we'll go ahead and close that down. So here's a really easy and quick way to make your blood. So I didn't close my sword yet. I already exported it, so I know this is lined up correctly. Once you know this is lined up correctly, what you can then do is I'm going to hit 7 to go in the top, and I'm going to go into my edit mode real quick. I'm going to go into wire mode, and I'm just going to right click at the bottom so everything else is deselected. By the way, all these red lines is for my UV unwrapping where I put my seams, just for reference. So I'm going to hit B for box select. I'm going to take this bottom section here, and I'm sorry, I want to take these dots like that. So I want to go ahead and take all of those, and then I'm going to box select up here, and then I'm going to hit delete faces, take out basically the whole guard area, and then I'm going to box select again. I'm going to drag this up a little bit. It doesn't need to be full tang, but it makes me feel better, so I did. Haha. I'm going to grab this. Oh, that's right. Grab and go along the Y. Shrink that up a little bit. Not that you need to. I just, like I said, this is how I'm working with it. I'm going to take away that piece of the guard, and I'm going to go ahead and hit delete and faces again. I also, not that you need to, I like to kind of open this up on the bottom since this is going to be the blood effect. It's going to be kind of like the seam. And I'm going to delete that as well. Now we pretty much have a hollow sheath that looks just like the blade itself, because it is the blade. The only other thing I like to do personally is I like to take the whole thing and I like to size it up just a hair, just to make sure that the blood isn't inside the sword. You don't necessarily need to do that. That's just something I like to do. And like as you notice, I barely moved it. So now that I have this resized, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to hit File, Export, and I'm going to go ahead and again export it as a 3DS file. And this time I'm going to go ahead and call it blood. And then I'm going to go ahead and say export that. Okay. So now that's taken care of as well. The only other thing that we need to do is get the Scabbard. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my Scabbard, and I'm going to then take and hit File, and then I'm going to import the 3DS version of my sword. And this is going to help me basically make sure not only that it's sized correctly by using the sword as a model to work off of. I thought I could import that. Apparently I can't. Oh, yeah, it's small. I'm sorry. Let's see. Let me go ahead and... Ooh. I apologize. I should have double-checked this. I did this a little bit earlier. I already set up my Scabbard. So probably going to be a better idea to take your sword and export that as an OBJ just to get the size once you have the orientation down to where it was. Once you have a chance to export that out, you can then open up your Scabbard and then import the OBJ, or you can even build your Scabbard on top of it to begin with. I created them as 3 separate objects and items, so you can kind of do it however you want, but the main thing is to try to get this on top of the blade, make sure it's covered properly and in a good position and size. So once you have the ability to size that and everything looks good, sometimes you might try to upload it into nifskope, and nifskope might yell at you and say you need to triangulate. You can do that just by hitting Control T, and all that does is add these little extra lines on your mesh to help define it better. Once you've had a chance to define this as well, you're then going to also export this too. Now, this is the one that was the trickiest, so I definitely want to cover this. So if I go ahead and export this as a 3ds, and I call this Scabbard, and I hit export, you are going to notice that it doesn't line up appropriately, and I want to show you how you can work with that. So if I come up here and I click on my Scabbard and I hit File and I hit Import 3ds, OK, and I click on my Scabbard, this one not only needs to be rotated just like the other one did, but let me go ahead and actually rotate that. So I'm going to hit 3 again, rotate it along the side, and I'm going to make sure I rotate it over the 3D cursor, which is in the center, and I'm going to go ahead and turn that and lay that flat. And then let me go ahead and hit File, Export 3ds, Scabbard, save over it. Alright, and let me try to import that again. Import 3ds, Scabbard. Okay, so you'll notice here that even though it's been imported, it is not lined up correctly. So this is actually the bottom. This is where it's going to be towards the tip, and where the sword goes in is somewhere here hiding behind the blade. So I actually need to rotate the whole thing around. So by looking at that, I can then come back to my mesh, hit 7 to look at it from the top, again rotate it around that center point, and then I'm going to hit R, and I'm going to just drag it all the way down, pull it around. Now the other thing is, you notice that this was on the complete other side, so you can actually drag this up too if you want to about where you had it before. It's completely up to you. You just got to work with it. Now if I hit File, Export again as a 3ds, like I said, this was the hardest thing for me to do, is working with this stupid Scabbard with this method. But I eventually did get good successful results, so I was happy at the end. Let's see. Again, we're going to try to import it. File, Import 3ds, OK, Scabbard. Okay, so now it looks about where we want it to be. So now that we have the Scabbard placed correctly, and actually let me go ahead and start this from scratch. I like to start with the sword. It doesn't matter which one you start with. And I'm going to hit File, Import 3ds, OK, take my Yanmadao. Again, I'm going to come down here to my Yanmadao, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to hit Edit, Transform, Edit. And then I'm just going to zero all this out, which is going to center out my sword for me. And I'm going to hit Accept. Now, the other thing that you can check to see if your textures are saved, if you hit Texture and Edit UV, you should see your UV mapping still saved. You can actually move this down too by right-clicking, and then you can select all, and then you can right-click, and then you can, let's see, I want to say it's Scale Translate Selected or something like that, and then I think this needs to go on the Y, so I want to say 2 on the Y, and you can pull it down there if you want to. I didn't do that. I just left it as is, and it didn't really affect my sword, so either way, and just closing it saves it automatically. I'm going to come down here to my shaders, and I'm going to go ahead and call this wherever you have your textures saved for your particular mod, and you'll create these folders. Usually it's good to have them in textures and weapons since it's a weapon. And this is just yanmadao.dds, which I think I can actually show you. So here's your data folder for Skyrim, and you're going to have textures, and you're going to have meshes. So here in the meshes, under weapons, Chinese, this is where I have my Yanmadao. And I have 2 copies that I saved, but it's the same one. You're not going to create a second file. You're just going to save it as a different name. Then I also have under here, under textures, weapons, Chinese. These are my DDS files. So right here, Yanmadao DDS. So that's the path that I'm using when I'm using this here. It's textures, weapons, Chinese, yanmadao.dds, and then here's my normal map. Same thing with the Scabbard, yanmadao Scabbard DDS. So just be aware of that when you're setting up your textures. And then if you want, just save time, you just copy the whole thing, and then you can just paste it down here, and then just put your underscore N. You're pretty much just replacing these, because here's the M down here, that was the N. You're just replacing these as you go with the ones that you want to work with. And like I said, you don't need the M. Like I felt it made it a little too bright, so I just kind of got rid of mine. All right, let's do the blood effect next. Something I recommend doing is rechanging the texture shapes, and I'll show you what I mean. So you're going to highlight your blood, and you're going to hit File. You're going to import, again, 3ds. Here's blood. It imports it. You'll notice it changes it to yanmadao. That's because that's the name of the blend file. So I actually click this again, and you'll notice too here the tip is too low. So first of all, we want to transform. We're going to hit Edit. You want to make this the exact same as your sword or your axe or whatever you're working with, and it moves it right back up and centers it. And then the next thing that you want to do here is you want to make sure that this is clicked, and where it says string, I right click there, edit string index, and then I'm going to go ahead and change it right back to edge blood 05, just to make sure all the properties are the same. And same thing here with the edge blood 6. I'm going to go ahead and hit File. I'm going to import the exact same one, the blood, and then I'm going to go back to it, and it says yanmadao again. I'm going to right click, I'm going to transform, edit, take all of these to 0, lines them up over here, hit accept, click this, come down here to string, right click it, edit string, and change this one as well back to the edge blood. And there we go. So we have those back. Now, the Scabbard. This is very important, so pay attention here. File, import 3ds. We're going to have to work with this a little bit. So not only are we going to take the Scabbard and import it, but we're also going to want to alter some things. The very first thing you'll notice is way over here, it is definitely not lined up. So we want to make sure that we do our transform and edit, and we want to mess with it. As we click it, we can see the direction it's going in. And basically, you just want to position this so it's over appropriately. Oh, take that down. Take it here, come in a little bit closer. And make sure it's covering up the blade appropriately. Work with it until it's at a point where you actually want it. And if you need to, you'll notice that these jump kind of a lot. So if I want us to be somewhere here in between, you can actually highlight the whole thing and just start from scratch with it. And then once you have it to where you want it to be, you can go ahead and hit accept. So you can rotate it if you need to. I would do most of the rotations in Blender itself by comparing, but the X, Y, Z, and everything like that, that's what I did. Is I did it until I had it where I want it and to where it looks good. The next thing that I did is, of course, there is always the textures. So again, we can come down here, we can even paste our sword one, and since it's named the same, just says Scabbard afterwards, and I just update that to Scabbard. Same thing down here. I'm going to take this and I'm going to call it Scabbard, and then I'm going to underscore and have that as N, and then this one here I'm going to go ahead and take out completely, because again, I'm not going to use my M even though I made it. So that's almost done. Something I've noticed, when I upload this into Skyrim, I draw the sword and the Scabbard stays there. The way I was able to work around this is, again, come back here to Scabbard, come to string, right click, edit, and then I can come down here to what it was originally called, which was SCB, and then click OK. For some reason, changing this back allowed me to draw it within the Skyrim game, and I was able to keep it. So, yeah, good times. So now here is the finished NIF. So we can go ahead and hit File, Save As, and then rename it to whatever you want it to be called. Let's go ahead and go to, I guess, the next part briefly, although there are other tutorials that basically covers how to use Blender and export in something like Blender 271, which is what I modeled it in originally. And like I said, this method's working for me at least. So the next part you would do is you open your creation kit. This is something you can of course download from the store. It should be free. It should come with your Skyrim, I believe. You're going to, of course, open up your Skyrim.esm. I'm going to hit OK. Let it load. And it will eventually load. Wow, it's taking a little bit longer. Of course, because I'm making a long video, it has to be longer because of load times. But, yeah, and then just say yes to all. This is just throwing a hissy fit. But yeah, if you guys have questions or want me to do other tutorials, I can. I basically made this tutorial to remind myself because I made an old mod, hadn't done it for a couple years and forgot how I did it. So this is working, so I'm going to go ahead and record it just so it's out there. Here we go. Okay, all, and then I'm going to go ahead and filter, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to look for the iron sword. That's also a one-handed sword, and I just like using that, but it doesn't matter which one you use. You're going to want to change the, oh, that's the other thing. When you save your NIF, you want to save a first-person copy and then a normal copy. It's the exact same NIF, the one that you just created. You can always just double-click your NIF again, and then hit File, Save As, and just make the other one first-person. So, in here, I'm going to look for the first person, and I'm going to look for the actual sword itself. And sometimes you have to play around a little bit, just find the right ones. So I'm going to go ahead and take the iron one, and I'm going to hit Edit. This is where you will start seeing your actual color, your textures, if it worked correctly. If you don't have your UV maps, then it's not going to work correctly. They're going to be white or blank. That's something going on with the textures. This method, like I said, does work for the correct ones. So here we go. I'm doing the first person Yamandao NIF, which is the same one as the other one. I'm going to hit open, and there you go, with textures. Yay. And lined up and everything. So I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to rename this, and I'm actually going to call it Yanmadao. Yanmadao. And then I'm going to copy that so I can reuse that. I'm going to hit OK. You want to create a new one, you say yes. And then you're going to come down here to the iron sword. Same thing. Edit what you want. I'm going to go ahead and change the name and the ID already. I'm going to leave everything else pretty much the same. I'm going to come down here for the first person model, and I'm going to scroll down. They are alphabetical. And I'm going to find my first person Yamandao that I just created, because it's the new item I just created. And then I'm going to edit the model being used. I'm going to hit edit again. Again, I'm going to go into weapons, Chinese, Yanmadao. This time, instead of the first person, I'm just using the Yanmadao one. I'm going to hit open. You will see the textures are working. If they're not working in this window, something's wrong. And I'm going to hit OK. Then if I wanted to, I can come over here, and instead of 7 damage, I can make it 70, or, you know, make the weight, make it a little bit lighter of a sword, maybe make it 6. You can edit whatever you want here, and then you go ahead and hit OK again. Make a new form, yes. And then the only other thing that I recommend doing is going to recipes and make a recipe. So recipe, weapon, iron sword, double click that. This will show where it appears to, so it'll appear under iron since I'm messing with the iron sword. Again, paste my Yanmadao. What am I crafting? I'm going to go ahead and hit Y to jump down to the Ys. That's what I'm crafting. Let me go ahead and take out the leather strips. You obviously want to make this reasonable. I just want to throw something together so you can just see it in the game. Okay, so once you do that, and you choose what materials you want, you name it what you want, you hit OK, you're pretty much done. So at this point, I can go ahead and hit File, Save, and then this one I'm just going to call Test, and I'm going to hit Save. There you go. Now you can use your sword and craft